Kentucky Chamber membership is over 2/3 comprised of small businesses across Kentucky, meaning the vast majority of our membership are those employers with 100 employees or less. Those individuals help us develop our policy. So the Kentucky Chamber legislative agenda does prioritize and focuses on the needs of small businesses. Today, we had an opportunity to go to the Capitol and talk to the House Small Business Committee, which is chaired by one of our guests you'll hear from in just a moment, Chairman Pratt. We talked about that agenda, and we're honored to have that opportunity. Also, earlier today, many of our members met with legislators through Zoom as a part of our small business program. And so we are thrilled to have you with us today. We're giving everyone just a moment to get signed in, and we will start momentarily. We want to thank you for taking time to be with us today. And we're giving just another moment. And we will get started. Again, my name is Travis Burton from the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for joining us for our small business webinar. We've got an excellent panel and going to have a great discussion about small business in Kentucky. I'm honored to be able to introduce to you the Kentucky Chamber Director of Communications, Jacqueline Pitts, who's going to lead our conversation today. Jacqueline.
Thank you, Travis. Welcome, everybody. We are so excited to have this discussion today. It's such an important conversation to have, especially right now. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started. I want to get our panelists talking. I'm going to let each of you introduce yourselves and kind of tell us a little bit about your business before we get into the discussion of how the pandemic has affected each of you. So let's start with Doug. If you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your business.
Sure, thanks. My name is Doug Goodwin. I'm the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships with Ulimi. Ulimi is a tech firm located in Covington, and we specialize in both custom and platform technology to help employers develop their workforce, to help them engage and communicate better with their employees, and help them overall grow their business by having a sustainable workforce model.
Wonderful, which is incredibly important, especially more and more important each day right now. So we'll move to Leah Scott. Tell us about your business and introduce yourself just a little.
Hi, my name is Leah Scott, CEO of the Logo Warehouse. Established January 1st in 2008 here in Louisville, Kentucky. And I am I say we, but it's really I as a sole proprietor, but I like to say there's no I in team. A promotional product and apparel business, and as of last year, including PPE due to the pandemic. So I'm just very happy to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful. And I'm excited to hear about how a lot of your business models have shifted. We will definitely get to that. Aaron, let's move to you. If you can introduce yourself and tell us a little about your business.
Sure. My name is Aaron Andrew, the president of ISG, or Integrated Sign and Graphic. We are a custom sign manufacturer based in Lexington. We do have national reach. We supply a lot of the kind of the larger scale construction projects as far as providing the signage systems, a lot of the custom light fixtures, a lot of the require custom fabrication. We have about 45 employees, all Lexington based.
Perfect. And last but certainly not least, Representative Philip Pratt, who is also chair of the Small Business Committee in the House, who a lot of us at the Chamber spoke with this morning, but also a small business owner. So Representative Pratt, if you can tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your business.
Thank you. Thank you, Jacqueline. And I want to thank the Kentucky Chamber for being such a great advocate for small businesses. You know, we are the economic drivers in the state, without doubt. We create 86% of all new jobs that are created in the state is by us. But I actually own Pratt Salon Landscape. We're located in Georgetown, Kentucky. We have 38 employees. We do full service commercial. We do residential lawn care, and we do commercial and residential landscaping. And like I said, we do full service. And also I'm chairman of a Small Business Committee, Information Technology here in Frankfurt, and glad to advocate for small businesses because I get it. I understand what it's like to actually meet a payroll and to actually sit up at night worrying how you're going to do it tomorrow morning. So welcome to everybody here.
Thank you all so much. Thank you all again for being here. We're going to get started with the conversation talking about last March. I mean, it is crazy to think that it's been almost a year since we all shut our doors, went home, and tried to figure out what came next. It has literally been almost a full year. So talk to us about what that time looked like for you all, especially in those first couple of days and weeks. Leah, we'll start with you. When the pandemic hit, what were some of your first thoughts and how did you proceed with your business?
So a little bit of background information. I've been working since I was 12 years old. And most small business owners have a second job or a main job and operate their businesses. That's just a reality. So I recently left the public sector the year before COVID hit to pursue my business on a full-time basis. It was doing really well once I realized the power of being home, how successful the business could be, and it grew. And then a little less than a year in, COVID hit. So you can only imagine being fresh, starting out on your own, leaving your full-time employment to start or to continue on your business and move it from part-time to full-time, and then being hit with COVID. At that same time, I'm a wife and a mother of 3 children, and a lot of you all are parents yourselves. So children are home now. So the stress of children at home, taking care of family who may have been sick or whatever things that you had going on prior to COVID. Now when COVID hits, that's just more stress added on. So it is difficult. My thought was, family comes first. I mean, we have to be able to pay the bills, but we have to rely on each other to make this work however we can. Take advantage of any type of grants or funding that's out there if we can. Just do what we can do to survive and be the best that we can be. I was going to start this meeting, honestly. I took my children to my parents' house, but I was going to start the meeting to show you all of my crazy life working with a toddler in my lap and having to get up and teach my kids if they had a question on algebra or multiplication. And you all were honestly going to see me make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches a few moments ago. I mean, that's the reality that we're in, right? And at the same time, sitting in my car to get away for a moment just to answer the phone and talk to a customer. I'm working at home as most of you are. So just to make this short and brief, it has been a challenge, but we still do what we need to do to keep going. And my heart just breaks right now. It's just kind of one of those things. We're in the unknown. We're just in the unknown. We don't know what's going to happen. I've seen a lot of businesses shut their doors. And one thing I am blessed about is that I decided to keep a home-based business for reasons such as this. If this were to occur, I wouldn't lose much more than what I could afford to lose. And then number 2, the blessing also, I'm in the business of promotional products and apparel. So I've mainly just done t-shirts and uniforms and things like that. And then when COVID hit, I received a call from a customer that wanted 3,000 thermometers. Well, we carry that in our warehouse, but it never occurred to me until all the calls that I started getting were dealing with personal protective gear. It dawned on me, well, wait a minute, maybe you need to refocus and focus on PPE to make sure your customers get what they need. So I maybe sold one order of t-shirts all of last year. That is a blessing to be able to have COVID, to be able to provide people with COVID safety type wear. But it also wasn't as, it's still hard being a small business because there were opportunities to be able to introduce myself to more customers who had those PPE needs. But again, I guess I could circle back to just being a small business in general. It's still hard to get in no matter what. So every day is a struggle. I mean, it's a struggle, but we've made it. We're a year in, and I see everyone's faces here. So obviously we've been able to push through, and that's kind of where I am with that.
Absolutely. And I think you've touched on a lot of the things that everybody is constantly still thinking about. And I definitely want to get into a bigger conversation about how you guys have shifted your business models and things like that too, because it is, I know that a lot of you have had to. Erin, let's go to you about the first days of the pandemic. I've been to your facility in Lexington. You've got quite the operation going over there. So you had to shut your doors and send people home at that point, I would assume, especially in the beginning days. But if not, what did that look like? What did it look like for you when the pandemic said it's time for small businesses and businesses across the state to shut their doors for a minute?
Well, we actually never shut our doors, not for a day. In the early stages of the pandemic, especially, in those first few days, obviously there are a lot of things to consider, and the unpredictability of it is somewhat overwhelming. What we had to do is kind of look in the mirror and ask ourselves, are we essential? That was the big question at the time. Those that weren't essential, they were closing their doors and allowing the essential businesses and personnel to still operate. This kind of gets into the conversation of how we adapted. But what we started doing right away was trying to determine how we could, support, the efforts of particularly the frontline healthcare workers at the time. And so we started manufacturing PPE, specifically face shields and sneeze guards. So it was a very, very quick transition. We fortunately had the equipment that we needed. We had the supply chain that we needed, just through our custom sign and lighting business model. And so we started manufacturing PPE right away. We were one of the first in Kentucky to actually get face shields to the hospitals and to the senior living centers, and those that were in kind of desperate need initially. So it was, I think it was challenging and sometimes frustrating for everyone here because of the sudden drastic change. But it also, I think, gave everybody a feeling or a sense of worth, and that we were contributing, positively during a time when everybody else in a lot of ways felt helpless. So that's kind of where we were, kind of right out of the gate. And, from there, we had a lot of considerations, to do what we were doing. We also had to have our own PPE in place, and we had to make sure that if we were asking employees to come in, that we were properly protecting them and making sure that the safeguards were in place. So there were a lot of quick decisions being made and executed just in those first few days that kind of put everybody in a tailspin, but that ultimately worked out for us, at least in the interim.
Doug, let's move to you. Ulimi, I know that the Chamber has utilized a lot of your services, especially throughout the pandemic, in terms of health checks and a lot of other things. So talk to me about what the start of the pandemic looked like for you.
So it's really interesting. I would consider Ulimi last March as a maturing startup. So we clearly hadn't made it like an established company yet, but we were there. We had customers. We had a product that was in the market. We had another product that was well into the development stage. The product that was in the market was Click 360. That's a performance management suite. And quite frankly, we looked at each other and we knew nobody was going to be wanting to purchase performance management at a time when you're laying off and you're just not spending right now. So that wasn't really a possibility. But we also, we're custom developers, and we kind of like stepped back and said, okay, the world needs something right now. What do they need and how can we help them? So we really took the approach of how can we help? We weren't necessarily worried about making, we had budget plans. We had, hey, this is where we're going to be at the end of the year. We set those aside and said, this is not real. We've got to focus on how we can help, how we can survive, and then how we can continue to build our brand, build our relationships. And so relationships like with the Chamber. So we took the we took our product called Reach, which was on the design, and we, instead of backing away, we accelerated. We put all our resources into getting that product to market. And Reach is a communication package. So it helps, you can use texting, so you can do personal communication from one spot. It makes it very easy to communicate and connect. But when we marketed it, we didn't go out and say, hey, this thing's great about connecting, it's engagement. We didn't say any of that stuff. We talked about using Reach to keep people safe, to keep people healthy, to keep yourselves compliant, and to keep yourselves operating. And that really found a niche. That's what people needed, and people were opening up their doors and they were purchasing. So that kind of got us through the summer months and kind of kept us moving along. And while we were doing that, we kept our big picture, the big picture conversations open. We kept those conversations going. Like I said, we continued to develop our relationships, even though we weren't going to see revenue for months, maybe years. We still kept the conversations going, and I think that's, that got us through it, and that's why we're still here today and still feeling pretty good about life.
Absolutely. And Representative Pratt, back in March of 2020, not only were small businesses kind of looking to say, what's next? You were in legislative session. We were at the Capitol every day until the rest of us weren't, and you all had to come up with a whole new system to pass laws and make huge decisions, including what to do with a budget and other things in the midst of a pandemic where none of us actually knew what was going on. So talk to me about that balance that you had to have when the pandemic first hit, of being a lawmaker, making these huge decisions, and being a small business owner.
It was fairly hectic there for a while. We were at the end of the session when the pandemic hit, so we had to make a lot of decisions very quickly. I was glad to see us pass House Bill 150, which actually gave a lot of relief to some businesses. And much like everyone else's story here, it was a very, very stressful time, not only being in the House, but also trying to navigate the new COVID regulations. Even my own business, we had to go, we are agricultural based, believe it or not. So we were not required to shut down, but that meant from us going to only 2 to a truck. That meant we had to get masks. We had to make sure that they kept the mask on. We had to make sure they had hand sanitizer. We make sure we did temperature checks every morning. Those were added expenses, all on top of everything we had to deal with. And I will tell you this, being my degrees in economics, I told everyone at my company, buckle down. This is going to be awful. Luckily, in my industry, it actually turned out to be just the opposite. Thanks to the PPP money, thanks to the small business loans and the $600 stimulus, we actually saw business grow. And I would, every fiber in my body tells me it shouldn't have, and it still tells me that it's not going to last. But I would forewarn any business member out there, still be cautious. Just make sure you budget wisely and make sure, because I still think that we are still not out of the woods yet, and it's still going to be tougher, especially when all the stimulus money runs out. But it was quite a challenge here at the state. We had a lot going on. We were scrambling quickly to try to figure out, okay, if we pass this, what can we do legally? What can't we do legally? It's just not, you don't snap your fingers and pass legislation. It's quite a process, but it was a very busy time. But I think we did some good for small businesses, and we look forward, we're even pressing this session, trying to help small businesses keep their doors open.
And you touched on exactly what I wanted to get to next, which is the PPP loans and the small business loans and all of the different kinds of federal assistance. Not only were small businesses trying to figure out what was going on, what comes next, you were also all trying to navigate the assistance that was being put out there if you needed it, helping employees if you had to lay anyone off. We had a lot of questions coming at the Kentucky Chamber about those issues, helped people navigate the unemployment system and things along those lines. So especially like Representative Pratt said, that money will eventually run out. And yeah, so we need to, let's talk about that. Has anyone had to go forward with a small business loan or anything along those lines, lay anybody off, deal with the unemployment system? What does that look like for you all? And I'll open that up for discussion for whoever wants to start first.
I will start. I will just be 100% candid with you guys. Being a small business and having to go through a lot of hurdles to get PPP or any funding, it's a slap in the face when you see people like Kanye West and Harvard University and a lot of wealthy politicians and their families receive millions of dollars in PPE, while the rest of us are struggling to put food on the table. It hurts my heart. And we have to be very honest with ourselves and say, what's going on here? You know, it's a slap in the face when you have to close your doors. A lot of my colleagues have closed their doors with their businesses, but liquor stores could remain open the whole time. So we have to hold our lawmakers and the powers that be that make the decisions accountable to say, this is not right. It's heartbreaking. And a lot of these businesses won't be able to recover. A lot of times with PPP, I think it's designed to help, but it also hurts because the amount that you need to survive and to keep going is normally not the amount that you get. You know, I think that they're changing their efforts with the second round, but they're also adding more hurdles. I think that in business, they need to look at your net is totally different than your gross. Those are two totally different things. To go by gross income versus your net income based on how much PPP you get, it's just not, it's designed to fail you in some ways. And, you know, I also think that, speaking from experience, when we are in a time like this in a pandemic, to be able to have funding or loan to offer someone at 1% when you could never get something like that when you really need it when business is good. That's another problem that I have with that. I think that once we recover from this pandemic, those type of loans at 1% interest need to be offered to us to restart our businesses and to be able to rebuild. And so it does help, but it also hurts, because if you can do that during a time when we're at our worst, you can also offer those services when we're at our best.
And I think that's definitely something that everyone needs to start looking at moving forward. And to your point, I think that when the pandemic hit, there were a lot of laws. None of us knew what was happening. No one knew what was going on. And I think that was reflected in a lot of the laws, especially at the federal level. And like you said, they're trying to make improvements, and like Representative Pratt said, it's not going to last forever. So it's definitely a delicate time. Anybody else have any experience with the PPP loans or the unemployment system? Because I know a lot of people on this call want to hear from their colleagues about those issues as well.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely we made a decision really early on that we weren't going to furlough or lay anyone off. If we were going down as a group, we weren't going to knock people off as individuals. So we definitely used the PPP to pay, the teams. I think the thing about Ulimi, we pride ourselves in self-resilience. So like as an executive team, we took no salaries. We took all our money and we put it into the teams, into the development. We used whatever resources we could have, whether it be PPP or extending lines of credit, just so we can kind of nurse ourselves through and get ourselves, through the worst part and start, and get past it. So yeah, I mean, it was tough. I mean, it still is tough, but like I said, we're coming out of it, and it's good. But I know many of us took second jobs for a while. We just did whatever we had to do just to keep things going, keep the lights on, keep things moving forward, and keep making progress.
And I know a lot of businesses made a lot of those tough decisions about executive salaries, salary cuts throughout, a lot of tough decisions. And it feels kind of far away at this point. I know we all had to do that almost a year ago, but it is incredible what a lot of small businesses did to keep their employees on and to keep their businesses afloat. So kudos to you all on that as well. Aaron, what about you?
We have been the recipients of both rounds of PPP. And very similar to Doug, we made the decision early on as well that if we were eligible for the PPP, that we were going to use that to pay our people. Even though the revenue at the time for a number of months there was not lining up with the expenditures, we allowed the PPP to bridge that gap. So for that, I would say that it worked. What I would say on the other side of that is, what we saw, looking back, now that this has been a year in the making, is that, initially, I think the PPP money and just all the public funding injected into the economy, certainly put a temporary Band-Aid for a good number of folks. There were certainly still a lot of people, obviously, in the unemployment line, and we still can't forget about those because that's still occurring. But at the same time, what we're seeing is that it really is a temporary Band-Aid, and I think we all have to kind of get serious, as far as what the next steps are, and really understanding what the long-term ramifications are. We supply, a lot of the retail industry, a lot of the hospitality industry, and by hospitality, specifically talking about hotels, restaurants. Those folks were decimated. And I took some strong stances in telling some of our peers that I felt like what had been done to them, was nearly criminal. And they're going to suffer for a while. We are seeing it because, while we're able to get through those first few months, there was a lot of construction, a lot of development that had been planned that completely stopped. I mean, they turned the faucets off. They were, instead of worrying about investing in their assets and long-term planning, they were worried about just collecting from their tenants and keeping their doors open, and things that the COVID-19 shutdowns put on them that they could have never expected. That is something that we are now seeing going into 2021 is going to be a challenge, because they stopped developing in 2020. Well, we are usually the ones that are part of the larger construction projects that right now they're not there, because people had lost the confidence to invest and develop, particularly from a commercial real estate standpoint. So as far as how long that lasts, as far as how long all of the public funds being injected into the economy allow for a Band-Aid, we don't know, but it will stop. And when it does, we've got to figure out how to be prepared to react and adapt once again.
Absolutely. Representative Pratt, what about you? Other thoughts on the stimulus and all of the things that we've seen and what's to come?
Well, again, I want to thank my banker and actually our congressmen and senators who their offices went way out of the way to try to help people navigate this, because it was very cumbersome. It was hard to get through the loan process. And without those people, I don't know if we'd ever done it. Y'all touched on a couple other things. Unemployment. People whose unemployment claims have not been processed yet. And everybody in this room, the small business owner, this happened to you, whether you laid in went off or not. Your rate may have went from the lowest, like I did, to the very highest, like I did. And that's how we create this to people all the time. With 38 employees, we did some quick math. That is $18,000 in my company alone for 38 employees, unbudgeted expense. That's a business killer. I was glad to see Russell Weber, Chairman Weber, bring a bill to the floor that would bring it back to what your pre-COVID rates were, because without it, it's going to shut businesses down. And amazing, I believe the number was 19 people voted against that bill. But they don't, I also understand they don't get small business, and that's something we have to do. And we're going to have to, and with this COVID, one thing we saw was very inconsistent rules. And I heard this, I think I'm small business all the time, like at State Fair, they closed it down, but Kentucky Kingdom was allowed, and that's on 600 acres. Kentucky Kingdom's on 7 acres. And they were allowed to have 2,600 people. That bothers me. That's very consistent. Child care, they were allowed to have 7 people in a room of 10 by 10. 10 kids in a room, 20 by 20. Their backyard was 5 acres. They're allowed to have 10 kids. Very inconsistent. And with that, even like in the restaurant industry, which was decimated, a friend of mine owns a bar and it's a restaurant, and it has probably 40 to 50 foot worth of bar space. The rules were they weren't allowed to have anyone sit at the bar and eat. Why? Again, I think what gets us very upset as business owner and us as representatives is we want to see consistent rules. Let us have a seat at the table. Let us tell you how we can run our business efficiently and still meet the COVID and CDC guidelines. But unfortunately, that's not how it works here in Frankfort. And so we have our challenges, and we are trying our best to let us be back at the driver's table, not someone else.
Absolutely. And we appreciate the work on especially a lot of those issues that you talked about. And at the end, we'll try, if we've got time, I want to talk about some of the issues that the business community is pushing for to help small businesses through this time that I know you're working on, Representative Pratt. Let's talk about the increased costs that you guys have faced, obviously, and then also the less revenue that you're bringing in. You know, demand, especially for a time, I'm sure changed quite a bit. Is that back to normal? Is demand back to normal, especially to outweigh the costs of the increased costs that you guys have to do? Unemployment insurance, getting PPE for your staff, things along those lines. Leah, I know that you said that your demand changed completely, where you only did maybe one t-shirt order, but you worked on PPE. Has your demand gone up? Is it back to normal? Where are you at on that?
So where I'm at right now is I have to go out and form relationships with new business. A lot of the customers that I had, hopefully it's a temporary goodbye, not a permanent one. But the reality of it is a lot of the casinos and some of the other relationships I built, they have to shut down, then they reopen, they have to shut down again. I've also lost customers because of the increase in raw materials right now due to COVID. A lot of the tariffs and things put on place when you do business internationally and get goods over there, that's caused a lot of price to increase. Not for me to make more money, but just the overall expense of producing a good, which is a turn off to customers that I once had who had the budget before, but no longer have the budget to buy. So that's also been rough. Another thing, which is out of a lot of our control, as you know, our delivery. The delivery isn't what it is anymore. So people still have timelines of when they need to receive their goods, but due to COVID and then especially the ice storm that we just had recently, people aren't getting their items on time anymore. So that's also been a negative impact on the business. Being a home-based business, my overhead's not as expensive. So I am blessed about that, but just the overall personal expenses, the personal things that we are going through in our life that have taken priority where our costs have increased trickles down to our businesses. A lot of small businesses survive off of personal credit cards. And those are things that you have to take account for. So right now it's just a combination of trying to retain and keep my current customers, but there's a lot of outreach to others. And then just having to work more with trying to secure government contracts, I think is important because that will lock you in for a longer period of time where hopefully you have a little bit of relief that you can have some consistent income coming in to help cover your expenses during a certain time frame. But again, that's just as hard for small businesses to incur as well. So, you know, that's kind of where I am right now with that.
Doug, Aaron, Representative Pratt, what about any of you guys on demand? And then also anybody who, I know we need to start wrapping up soon, anybody on childcare, how schools, I know Leah talked about this a little bit, your employees are having to teach kids from home now, they're having childcare issues, less than they did before, but there are still school districts in the state that are fully still at home. So just weighing in on any of those things that you guys want to, that's been the biggest impact for you.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think for demand, and I'm glad I get to share it. I mean, sometimes I feel I'm a positive human being. Sometimes I feel guilty about being positive all the time. But I will say our demand, really starting right at the beginning of the year, started to increase significantly. We've been able to sign new clients. We've had several clients that had to shutter. So they couldn't do business with us because their business was closed. They're starting to reopen again. They're re-engaging with us and starting to buy services again. So we are seeing that revenue increase on a pretty steady and even increasing basis. I would say we're today where we thought we would have been last May. So we probably lost about 10 months. But we're kind of back to that level again, and we're getting onto the positive side of the ledger. In terms of cost, fortunately, we've been a remote business from the beginning. We do have an office, but for the most part, we all work remotely. So we didn't have a lot of expenses like that to deal with. And I think that was fortunate. And my heart goes out to the folks who are dealing with, you know, the hospitality industry and the promotion industry. Those are tough. I mean, ours was tough, and we had hospitality customers who closed, and that revenue's gone. But because we're a tech firm and we're able to pivot and solve different kind of problems, I feel like that gave us more of a fighting chance. So we are starting to see the recovery right now.
And Aaron, you made such a good point about commercial real estate. Again, I've been in your facility. I've seen some of the signs you make for the type of businesses. And you're right. Some people are, like Doug's business, fully remote now. Some people they were in brick and mortar. They're now going to move a lot more toward that. So demand has to have changed for you too. So how have these things impacted you?
Sure. Our revenues are certainly down over, especially the last couple of quarters, because demand for the large scale projects in particular are down. What we are kind of fighting to do as far as just adapting is try to shake more trees and have, more transactions and realizing that it's going to be smaller projects. And, instead of the 8 or 10 really large scale projects a year, we realized that, we might have to do 50 or 60 smaller projects. And that, that definitely results in kind of a change of business model and how we're set up and how we manage things. But it's kind of the reality that we face. It's almost like you're working harder for less across the board. But, a lot of small businesses are in that position right now. And we realize, to be still open and able to, for the most part, retain all of our employees, we've been fortunate. One thing that we have had to deal with as far as just a challenge to overcome is the childcare issue, particularly in Fayette County. It seemed there for a good number of months, actually, since the pandemic started, that Fayette County Board of Education had no intentions of ever going back to in-person. And that really was challenging for a lot of our employees, because we have to be here to produce. We have a very hands-on operation. We have, welders, we have electricians, we have folks that are actively producing tangible product. So it was a challenge for a lot of them, and we had to make a calculated decision to be more flexible than we ever imagined we would be, just to try to accommodate both the needs of the company and the business, but also the personal needs of the employee. And that hopefully is a stage that we're getting past, but it's been difficult for a lot of people. And what Lee was talking about earlier, as far as the challenges she's faced, at home, as a mother, also trying to run her business is something I think a lot of people feel. Lee, I find that the best thing to do is to go to the bathroom and shut the door. Maybe you can have a conversation there on the phone or something, but it's definitely difficult.
Oh, I'd like to. The problem is they know how to pick the locks.
Representative Pratt, what about you? And let's talk about some legislation that is moving right now that could be helpful to small businesses in Kentucky as well.
Well, thank you guys, the small business owners on this too. And one thing I will say as a small business owner, when people say 40-hour week, I said, what is that? That's something, no, that doesn't exist in our world, all said and done. And right, childcare is a big deal right now. I hear from the childcare providers how that they want to open up more safely. And I touched on that a little bit earlier. Also, one thing that was a big thing, and that's what I've heard everybody on this call talk about, it went to more of an internet-based business, all said and done. And that's one of my passions. Last session, I passed House Bill 362, which is a mechanism to get funding, to get internet out to the unserved and underserved areas of Kentucky. And with that, when they closed the schools down, you realize there were 32,000 children in the state of Kentucky with zero. We're talking about just kids, not families, kids that had no internet service. Well, I want to thank the governor for making the hotspots. The problem of it is, most of those 32,000 that did not have internet did not help. We have to do better. And that's one of my big pushes this time, is to actually get internet out to unserved and underserved areas of Kentucky, because it's the new highway, without a doubt. It's as important as the road in front of your street. And actually, if you were at my house, you heard me tell a story over from Thanksgiving to Christmas, there wasn't just one box in front of my house. There were several boxes every day where my wife was ordering something offline and to be shipped to our house. So I get it without a doubt, but we are doing several bills. We got House Bill 413, that's Russell Weber's bill to help with the UI unemployment. We passed House Bill 10, which was hold harmless, which is a big deal. and also Senate Bill 5 is a complementary bill to that. If you don't think you're going to get sued, you're going to get sued. Somebody's going to walk by your business, in your business, or by one of your employees and say, I got COVID and I want someone to sue you. It's coming. This basically says if you follow the CDC guidelines and actually follow those guidelines, then you are held harmless. Not again, and there, I think there's well over 50 lawsuits already filed, and there are people advertising daily. We want to sue for you, so we need to protect it. We have the tax liability. I think there's House Bill 278 that basically said you can actually take your PPP on PPP loans and you can actually subtract your deductions. The federal already allowed that. The state didn't. I'm not too sure how that comes about, but and like I said, we're actually working with. We got House Bill 125, 253, House Bill 10, 5, tax liability, House Bill 7. We have several bills we're working on to help small business. And I will tell you, as a member of the House and a small business owner, people catch my ire from time to time when they start talking about how this affects businesses, and they've never run a business, they've never owned a business, they've never sat up at 3 a.m. saying, how am I going to meet payroll this week, or how am I going to figure this out? They usually may get a little bit of a tongue lashing from me when they tell me how it affects my business. So I do advocate and fight for small business because I get it, I've lived it, and someone asked me when I knew I made it, and I said, when I get there, I'll let you know. But again, it is a tough road, but thank everyone. But yes, ma'am.
Thank you all so much. You so many great points. And to Representative Pratt's point, I think that this is such an important conversation to have because we keep hearing things are going back to normal, things are going back to normal, we're coming out of this, it's almost over. But for small businesses, it's not at all. Everything is still different. So to hear from you all about how you have evolved and changed and succeeded in some ways, but still the struggles you're facing, I think is so crucial to help people understand what we're still going through. So I want to thank each and every one of you, our great panelists, for participating today. And thank you to everyone who joined us.